conduct we will describe today occurred over more than 20 years. There are many people and many entities involved. After vetting, we now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases. Many powerful people will be exposed. Many dirty secrets will be revealed. The names that we're going to name are names that will shock you. They already know who they are. I'm talking about the people that participated, encouraged it, egged it on, willing participants in vile conduct. I would imagine, as we speak here, there are a myriad of people who are very nervous. You can't hide skeletons in the closet forever. The claims we intend to bring will include violent sexual assault or rape, sexual abuse, facilitated sex with a controlled substance, false imprisonment, compelling prostitution, sexual misconduct, dissemination of video recordings, false imprisonment, sexual abuse of minors. I would expect there are many people out there right now who are desperately searching their memories as they delete their texts and data.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman. And before we get into today's episode, look, I want to take a second and thank all of you who have shared Exposed. We are now among the highest rated podcasts in the United States. Right now, actually, as I'm recording this, we're number 33 in a category of over 106,000, the society and culture category on Apple Podcasts, and number 244 out of over 2 million podcasts in the United States in the overall podcast category. And I just want to give all of you a heartfelt thank you for your support of what we're doing. Look, the ratings have been coming in. Y'all been rating the podcast. If you haven't, please do so on whatever podcast platform you listen to. It's so important because that's how the podcast gets out there to other people. So I just want to give you all a heartfelt thank you very much for all you do for this podcast to help. Much love, seriously. This particular episode is very detailed, and it contains information that just came out. And for legal purposes, I want to say that all of these are allegations. They're alleged. Nobody's been found guilty in a court of law yet. And I'm going to give you some specific scenarios for the first time that you've never heard in this episode. So I want to preface it with the legalese of this is all alleged. You can be left up to your own peril as to what you think. I know you probably have a good idea what I think. So let's get into it. And I want to start with what occurred Tuesday, October 1st, around 11 o'clock a.m. There was a press conference in Houston, Texas that was called and held by a very prominent Texas attorney, a guy by the name of Tony Busby, head partner, I guess you could say, in Busby Law Firm. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Tony Busby, because I know a lot about Tony Busby. Shout out Tony Busby. Now, some of you should know about him already. I did a 2-part series. It's probably about 3 months ago on the former quarterback of the Houston Texans, a guy by the name of Deshaun Watson, who had a rash, to say the least, of sexual assault cases related to masseuses and massage therapists. If you hadn't heard, go check it out. Tony Busby was the attorney that represented many of the victims in those cases. And a lot of those cases, Deshaun Watson had to pay a lot of money. Let's just say that. honestly, he's one of the most successful trial lawyers of all time. His law firm has settled cases in the billions with a B of dollars. And of course, the most high profile cases in the South, especially in Texas. He was a big time lawyer for the victims of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And he actually represented over 120 victims who died or were injured in the what was known as the Astroworld Festival crowd crush incident. So no stranger to high profile cases by any means. Now, Tony Busby, he is a little bit unique. He was actually quite well known in the Houston area because he parked a tank, an actual Sherman tank, in his driveway. And it was designed, a lot of people say, to aggravate those who lived in his very rich subdivision. Although he's very unique, he is also an amazing attorney, which no doubt will strike a little bit of fear into Diddy's legal team. There's a lot of high-profile lawyers involved in this stuff right now. So in this press conference, he gave information that has never been heard. And you're going to hear it today. And folks, shocking. So let's get into it. I'm going to summarize it, and then I'm going to play the actual news conference for you to hear Tony Busby in his own words. And he really lays it out. So you really need to hear both. But the first big bomb that he dropped was that he was representing, along with another attorney, 120 alleged victims who intend to bring claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs and many other individuals. Underline many, right? Now, he got involved in this lawsuit in an interesting way. A guy by the name of Andrew Arsdale, and Andrew Arsdale is managing partner of a law firm called ABA Law Group. And ABA Law Group has been working for like 6 months on this, well before Diddy was indicted and put in jail recently. The issue was the lawsuits that Andrew Arsdale was getting, they just never quit coming in. And he started to get overwhelmed, and he just couldn't handle the caseload by himself. And with Tony Busby's reputation, he knew that Tony Busby was not only a great attorney, but he's also someone who has handled a ton of cases as it relates to sexual assault, especially with the Deshaun Watson stuff. So he reaches out to Tony and he said, hey, not only do I want you to help me with these cases, I would like you to take the lead on these cases. And shout out to him for recognizing that Busby needs to be in the lead on these cases. He just has an extraordinary amount of experience with these. So Tony Busby himself, he's handling about 50 of these cases, and Andrew Arsdale is handling the balance of these cases that they have so far. Tony Busby in this press conference, he said a lot of key things, and I'm going to cover those for you. One of the things he said was that many of these people that have filed these lawsuits have already spoken to the FBI. And he explained what I told you several episodes ago, which was the people who are coming out wouldn't have ordinarily came out, but they're now stepping forward to make their voices heard in an effort to pursue justice for themselves because the fear has lessened. Cassie already came out, right? You remember I told you, I think it was in the last episode, how much of a hero that she is, because she was the first. They're all heroes. But Cassie, had she not come out, probably none of this would be out right now. When they saw, and when I say they, I'm referring to the victims, when they saw Cassie speak up, they felt empowered. And we all know what it's like at some point in our life, hopefully, to feel empowered. And it just gave them the confidence that they can do it too. So don't think just because nobody had came out for so long, it means it didn't happen. The power that Diddy wielded was a real thing, and the fear that he wielded was a real thing. That's why this has taken so long. Now, Tony Busby did not hold back in the press conference at all, as you'll hear, and he stated many secrets are going to be revealed. He also said his law firm has already collected pictures, video, text, and he made it known that he's currently in the process of corroborating many of the statements to make sure that they have legitimacy and merit. He said he has a former detective from the Major Offenders Unit in the Houston Police Department. He's put him on staff, hired him, and he's going to help the Busby law firm vet each and every claim. And let's talk about that for a second, because it's important to note that these attorneys don't just file lawsuits the second someone comes to them and accuse somebody else of doing something, especially when it's something of a sexual nature, because before they ever go to the public with anything, they have to vet it. Otherwise, they can be seen as acting in bad faith, and you can actually be disbarred for bringing frivolous lawsuits. So what that tells me is that every one of these cases that he is about to file in court, they have a lot of evidence. Look, he's no dummy. He knows that Sean Combs has some powerful lawyers, and any misstep that he makes, they're going to catch. He's going to make sure his ducks are in a fucking row. You can believe that. And so if he's about to file 120 lawsuits, guaranteed he's got some pretty good evidence that this shit occurred. Make no mistake about it. Just because someone shows up at Tony Busby's law firm or his co-counsel's law firm and says, I got a lot of evidence regarding Diddy, they don't just run with it. They vet all of that. They have to, especially in this case with the defendant having so much money and, you know, his own powerful law system. And he also brought up a good point in that these cases are very hard to prove. And look, y'all, many times it's the victim's word against the alleged perpetrator's word. If you're a fan of A Few Good Men, a great movie. If you'll remember Tom Cruise in that film, he had a line where he said, "It doesn't matter what I believe. It only matters what I can prove." When these victims come in to a law firm, most lawyers, they're giving the victim the benefit of the doubt. They're going to assume they're telling the truth, but they don't look at things that way in a legal sense. They look at, okay, you're saying all this happened, prove it. Because it doesn't matter if I believe you. It only matters if I can prove it in court. One person's word against another's is typically not enough, y'all. And that kind of leads me to my next point, which is, what is the difference between civil and criminal prosecution? And the example that comes to mind when I think about it is the O.J. Simpson trial. And that's a good example and a bad example. It's a bad example because he was found not guilty, and just about everybody that's breathing knows that O.J. Simpson was probably guilty. But I'm using it as an example because he was found not guilty in a criminal case, but he was found guilty in the civil trial. And a lot of people couldn't understand that. They couldn't understand how are you not guilty in a criminal trial, but guilty in a civil trial? So let me explain that to you. The burden of proof is different between those two things. In those two instances, in a criminal trial, you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning overwhelming evidence that this person did whatever it is they're accused of doing. In a civil trial, you just have to prove it's more likely that the person being sued is guilty. look at it as 50% plus one. But nonetheless, even in a civil trial, one person's word against another's usually not enough. You have to have some form of evidence. Then he went on in the press conference to describe the demographics of the people that filed the lawsuits. He said, you should know this group is evenly divided between males and females. There are 60 males and there are 60 females. 62% are African American, 30% are white, and the remainder are Hispanic or Asian. He even talked about the states the victims were from, and he said they were from more than 25 states, with the majority being from California, New York, Georgia, and Florida. And then it got even more shocking with regard to the ages of the victims. He said the youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. He said they had an individual who was 14 years old, one that was 15 years old, and even went on to say that of the 120 individuals who are plaintiffs, 25 were minors at the time that the incidents occurred. Fucking sick. Then he got into the time frame again, and he made a point to mention that these occurrences span over 25 years, all the way back to 1991. 25 years. Think about that. This guy has been getting away with this for 25 years, and he did say that the majority of the cases were from 2015 going forward, but the oldest case is from 1991. And he brought up that point because he wanted to make the point that that's why you're seeing so many lawsuits. We're not talking about 120 individuals in a year time span or 2 years or even 10 years. We're going over 25 years. And he addressed all the people out there wondering why it took so long for victims to step forward. And again, he made a good point. He mentioned that many states in the United States have not recognized how difficult it is for victims to step forward in these circumstances and make those type of allegations. And he actually shouted out New York and California as states that have specific statutes in place that revive claims, meaning even if the statute of limitations is up criminally on that case, it can still be pursued civilly, which is the case here in a lot of those cases. And he had a great quote in that press conference that I certainly think is worth repeating. And that was to keep in mind that a lie has great speed, but the truth has endurance. And what he was getting at there was you can get away with something for 25 years, but eventually it's going to catch up with you and the truth is going to come out. And then it got really interesting. He started talking about the acts and some of the specific details. And he started out by saying the incidents occurred primarily in New York, either Manhattan or the Hamptons, or they occurred in California, primarily Los Angeles, or Florida, primarily Miami, with most of the events occurring at parties, after parties, release parties, New Year's Eve parties, and all white parties, which Diddy was known for. He was famous for what was known as his white parties. And he even mentioned something called a puppy party, which I have yet to figure out what a puppy party is, but I hope it's not what it sounds like. And if anybody out there knows what Diddy's puppy parties were, please message me on Facebook and let me know, because I can't figure it out. So another interesting thing that he said, and hopefully this will shut up a lot of the naysayers who were saying, why didn't they ever report it? Because they don't understand the power that intimidation has, right? But I will have them all know that in the cases that he's brought forward, these 120 cases, more than 55% either reported it to the police when it occurred, or they went to the hospital and reported it to the hospital and had exams and rape kits and drug tests to find out what the fuck they were given. So they were reported in these cases over 55% of the time. So I hope that puts that question to bed. Now, before we go any further, one of the things that these attorneys, investigators are investigating is they're looking at these cases and they're saying, what are the common denominators? Because if you have 120 people come out and in 110 of those cases, they're all describing the same things. They were drugged the same way. The sex occurred the same way. They were tied up the same way. There's a lot of similarities. But these people don't know each other. They haven't communicated with each other. It's just all the cases are similar. That's a good clue that they're telling the truth, right? So he brought up the drugs, and that in the majority of these cases, the common denominators were the way in which they were given these drugs. And we'll get into that a little bit. But he mentioned one particular drug that popped up a lot in a lot of these cases, kind of like the quote unquote chosen drug. And get ready for this. It's called xylazine. And it has a street name called Trank. So you may wonder what that is. Horse tranquilizer. It is sold by veterinarians to tranquilize a horse. And you can put it in a drink. You can put it in water or alcohol in the case of Diddy. And there's other ways you can mix this tranquilizer as well. But he was given, allegedly, horse tranquilizer to many of these victims. And how do they know that? Because these victims would go to the hospital and they would get tested to see what kind of drugs were in their system. And that's what would pop up. And that's not a drug that's common, y'all. Nobody gives themselves, well, there's some people that do, but the majority of people don't use Trank. It's not just going to pop up in relation to all these cases with Diddy unless it was used by someone intentionally trying to tranquilize you. He also mentioned in this press conference that it's not a class action lawsuit. And y'all, a class action is when one or two people file a case and it's on behalf of a much larger population of people. Okay. All of these cases will be individual cases. Each case is going to live and die on its own merit. And that's important because if these are individual cases, that means there'll be individual defendants. And he mentioned that one case may just be Sean Combs is getting sued. Another case, it may include a range of people. And he went on to say that the day will come when we will name names other than Diddy Combs. And he said, I already know who some of these individuals are. We're going to make damn sure that we're right before we do that. But the names we're going to name, assuming our investigators confirm and corroborate what we've been told, which he's pretty sure that's going to happen. He said they are names that will shock you. These are individual cases, and they will be revealed when that particular case is ready to be filed. They already know who they are. So those names are coming. And he mentioned that he's not just talking about people that participated, but also complicit bystanders. And let me tell you what a complicit bystander is. That's someone who watched the behavior occurred, but they did nothing to stop it. They didn't report it. They just basically watched and didn't give a shit, right? People that encouraged it, egged it on. But he's also going after people that participated in it. And he said in that particular quote, they know who they are and I know who they are. And he continued on with what I titled this episode because I loved the term so much. He said, I call them facilitators of foul play. That's strong. He went on to say, as we identify them, each will be part of the case as defendants. These defendants will not only include individuals, but will also include corporate entities who ultimately profited off of this culture and behavior. Banks, pharmaceutical companies, hotels, whatever. And let's talk about that real quick. In many episodes ago, we talked about the Cassie incident, the video that came out in the hotel where Diddy beat the shit out of her, right? If you'll remember, Diddy thought that he bought the only copy of that tape from the hotel. Guess what? That hotel is complicit. And I've screamed that shit since that tape came out. Why is that hotel not getting the shit suit out of them right now? Because they knew about this shit and let it happen. Pisses me off. But he went on to say these individuals, and he's talking about the people that were complicit in these activities, not necessarily corporations, but the individuals. These individuals were paid cash. Many of these individuals involved, whether they were the ones being assaulted or abused, or they witnessed other people being assaulted and abused, were paid and threatened and then told to leave. Typically paid 10 grand in cash and then told to leave. Then they were threatened as they were leaving. He went on to say, so in addition to Sean Combs, you should know the defendants in these cases we're going to file will include anyone who engaged in the assault, anyone who participated in such a way, who encouraged or facilitated the conduct, who was in the room and watched it happen but made no effort to stop it, any venue and venue owner who was aware of what was going on but failed to stop it, any individual or entity who knew about the conduct, and any individual or entity who covered it up or helped cover it up. These people know who they are and they should come forward now. And then he fucking struck lightning when he said, I would imagine as we speak here, there are a myriad of people who are very nervous. You can't hide skeletons in a closet forever. And I would expect there are many people out there right now who are desperately searching their memories as they delete their text and data. Boom. That is dead on balls accurate. Love it. So he gave some facts into the individual cases. And he mentioned what I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the MO, the common theme, right? That's what they look for, these attorneys. And he said, typically the victim is lured into a situation where he or she is given a drink. Typically, that drink reported by these victims is laced with something. Once the drink takes effect, the perpetrators perform all kinds of sexual acts on the victims, many times passing him or her around as other people watch and enjoy the show, and then leave the victim ashamed, confused, injured, and wondering what happened. When the victim reaches out, he or she is told to not say anything. Sometimes there are threats of physical violence or financial repercussions or bodily harm. Sick. He also said that he expects they will start filing cases against Sean Combs and other perpetrators within the next 30 days. Andrew Van Arsdale also came up to the podium, and he mentioned a staggering number in a 10-day period that Andrew Van Arsdale's law firm, ABA Law Group, had come forward. And he mentioned that number at over 3,000 people in 10 days. Now, you're going to have your share of bullshit on there. You're going to have people that are they just want to cause trouble. You're going to have people that just want to be famous. You're going to have all that. So I don't want you to focus on that. I want you to focus on the 120. Because if it gets to a point where the case is filed, that's what matters. That means there's proof there. Because that attorney, again, especially in this case, especially with the amount of money Diddy has and the powerful attorneys he has, these attorneys aren't going to file unless they're pretty sure they can win that case. So don't focus on that too much, but it was worth bringing up. Busby went back to the podium and he discussed specific individuals. And he said, depending on the age of the victim, when you file these cases, these individual cases, you file them under Jane Doe or John Doe. And he said each state is different in that respect. Typically, there's a balancing test, like a public's right to know the name of the victim and plaintiff versus confidentiality and safety of the plaintiff. So he said his intention was to file them all under a pseudonym, meaning the victim, not the person actually being sued, right? He's going to file those under a pseudonym until the court tells him otherwise, because it's different from state to state. And then he said, just to give you a sense of what we're trying to corroborate, he said one individual who was 22 years old at the time she was assaulted said the typical MO at one of these parties that has widely been discussed in the press was when you were handed a drink. And now, you know that drink's laced with something. And if you refused to drink it, you were actually kicked out of the party. Let that sink in for a minute. I mean, the admission to this party was that you had to drink the chosen drink that was handed to you. And now we know that in most cases, maybe even more than 90%, these individuals were drugged with some sort of drug. That was kind of the MO. They would kick you out of the party. Did he hand you a drink? You ain't drinking the drink? Bye. Get the fuck out. Now, in another instance, he mentioned an individual who was 9 years old at the time. And he was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. Other boys were there to audition as well. And all of them were trying to land a record deal. All of them were minors. This individual was sexually abused, allegedly, by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio in the promise to both his parents and himself that he was going to get a record deal. In another instance, another minor told, allegedly by Sean Combs, that he would make him a star, but he needed to visit with him in private about it, away from his parents. And once they were in a private area, allegedly, Mr. Combs made the victim perform oral sex on him. Another incident he mentioned, an individual 15 years old at the time, flew to New York City to attend a party, was drugged, and then taken into a private room, allegedly in the presence of Mr. Combs, where this female individual minor was raped, and then other individuals took turns raping her. He referenced another individual, 26 at the time of the occurrence, who was picked up by, allegedly, Mr. Combs and several other people in a black SUV from an airport, given a drink, and woke up the next day not knowing what the hell happened, but had pain and damage to both her vagina and anus. She then went to the hospital, was missing her underwear and her shoes. Just horrible. Another incident where an individual, this time not a minor, was attending a group dinner, allegedly with Mr. Combs in Miami. She was not drinking because she was pregnant, but whatever she drank at the table, apparently it was laced, according to her. She blacked out. She woke up in the same bed again, allegedly with Mr. Combs at his mansion in Miami, and her vagina and anus were tore and sore. He named another incident where an individual who was 20 at the time was asked to attend a party. She was on the street, right? And she's flattered. She went to the party. She was given one drink, remembers nothing else. Ultimately, she was so messed up, she went to the hospital. They found cocaine in her system, and they found that horse tranquilizer, trank, in her blood system. 25 out of 120, y'all, of these individuals were minors at the time that their assaults occurred. Absolutely disgusting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play you in its entirety. It's about 30 minutes long. It's that press conference that Tony Busby held. And you got to hear it in his words because there's a lot of things I left out. I want you to hear him say it. So here's that.
Team as they speak. As many of you know, our law firm has been at the forefront of some of the most important litigation in the United States. We like the tough cases. We thrive in the complicated cases. We've handled over the last 25 years some very big and very important cases. I believe that this one may surpass them all. There are many facets to this. The conduct we will describe today occurred over more than 20 years. There are many people and many entities involved. And we're going to follow this evidence wherever it takes us. We will find the silent accomplices. We will expose the enablers who enabled this conduct behind closed doors. We will pursue this matter no matter who the evidence implicates. These brave victims who have stepped forward deserve nothing less. The biggest secret in the entertainment industry that really wasn't a secret at all has finally been revealed to the world. The wall of silence has now been broken, and victims are coming forward. Our team has had at this point more than 3,285 individuals contact us with people claiming to have been victimized by Sean Combs. After vetting, we now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases. And you should know, to the extent the clients feel comfortable, we also intend to make these individuals available to the authorities, specifically to the FBI. And you should also know a few of them have already been spoken to by the FBI. Now, before we discuss the nature of the claims and claimants themselves, let me comment on the large volume of calls we have received since our first announcement. Even before the indictment of Sean Combs, we had received a small volume of calls and had screened a handful of cases. After the indictment of Sean Combs and the announcement that we were pursuing these claims, the floodgates opened. People who wouldn't otherwise, for a variety of reasons, are now stepping forward to make their voices heard and to pursue justice. But no, most of these people are scared. They fear backlash in their communities. They fear backlash in their own families. They are afraid of retaliation from the perpetrators and their associates. They are rightly afraid for their own personal safety. I expect that through this process, many powerful people will be exposed. Many dirty secrets will be revealed. We know what we are potentially up against. And as is always the case in situations like this when a celebrity is involved, people can be downright mean and nasty. You would be shocked at the length fans will go, no matter the evidence to the contrary, to defend celebrities they love. I mean, there's a reason for this word fans. They're fanatics. I've personally already been threatened multiple times on social media. And when I agreed to pursue this, I expected as much. This isn't my first rodeo. But victims who step forward to have their voices heard should not be subjected to that kind of conduct. They should not be targeted. I want to say this, and I want to be clear about it. Although we are vetting each call as stringently as we can, I always start with a mindset that I believe victims. I believe victims because I understand the tremendous courage it takes to step forward. So if you're watching this, please hear me. If you're out there and you have been victimized, you are not alone. There is a great strength in numbers. You can seek redress. You can obtain justice. We can help you, and we will help you. That being said, as stated, we are vetting every call that we receive. We have had to turn away some. For each, we ask for corroboration. For each, we ask for the identity of witnesses. We also have collected pictures, videos, texts. We check venues, we check dates. We want to corroborate that the claims being made have legitimacy and merit. We have on staff now a former detective from the Major Offenders Unit of Houston Police Department who is helping us vet each claim. We're using our common sense. We're being stringent because, as I said, these are not easy cases. They're very tough. The process is hard, and in some cases, the process is very lengthy. These cases are hard to prove. Many times it's the victim's word against the alleged perpetrator. Each of these victims will no doubt be publicly attacked by the alleged perpetrators, and in some cases, the general public. The feckless and cowardly keyboard warriors love to attack. We know what we're up against. We did not enter this fray blindly. I wish it was my last such fray. I wish this type of behavior wasn't so pervasive, but it is what it is, so we will press on. As I said, our law firms have been retained by 120 individuals at this point to pursue cases in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs. You should know, in this group, it is evenly divided between males and females. There are 60 males and 60 females who have joined us to pursue these claims as plaintiffs. In this group, 62% identify as African American, 30% are white, and the remainder are Hispanic or Asian. The victims are from more than 25 states. The majority are from California, New York, Georgia, and Florida. And I want to focus on the ages of these victims. When we talk about the ages of the victims when the conduct occurred, it's shocking. Our youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. We have an individual who was 14 years old. We have one who was 15. 25 of the 120 individuals who are plaintiffs in these cases were minors at the time of the acts complained of. The time frame of the acts complained of is very wide. The conduct at issue spans from the years 1991 all the way till this year, 2024. If you wonder why there are so many alleged victims, that's your answer. We're talking about more than 25 years of this type of conduct. Now, although most of the victims who have stepped forward were victimized after 2015, this has been going on for a very long time. Now, when you think about the fact that some of this conduct occurred 25 years ago, and you wonder why would it take somebody so long to step forward, I want to remind you that many states in the United States have recognized that it's very difficult for a victim to step forward and to make these types of allegations when something very terrible has happened to them. I'll use New York, the state of New York, as an example. The state of New York has specific statutes in place that revive claims that are even claims that would typically be not able to be brought, that it revives such claims and they can be brought even 25 to 30 years later. Because there's a recognition there in New York and California and other states that it's very difficult for a victim to come forward. And I would respectfully suggest the only reason many of these people are coming forward because they see other victims coming forward. And it gives them some comfort that, hey, I won't be the only one. And I expect more victims will come forward. You know, there's an old saying that says, a lie has great speed, but truth has endurance. The acts complained of in these cases that we're going to file occurred primarily in New York, either Manhattan or the Hamptons, or occurred in California, primarily in Los Angeles, or in Florida, primarily in Miami. Most of these events and incidents occurred at parties, typically after parties, or album release parties, New Year's Eve parties, 4th of July parties, something they called a puppy party, the all-white party, although several of these events occurred at auditions. Many times, especially young people wanting to break into the industry, were coerced into this type of conduct in the promise of being made a star or in the promise of having Sean Combs listen to their tape or even let them read for Sean Combs. You should know that some of this behavior occurred at well-known venues in New York City. Some of this behavior occurred at private residences of people that we all know. Some of this behavior occurred at hotels that we're all familiar with. You should know that more than 55% of the victims filed reports, reported this conduct to either the authorities, that is the police, or to hospitals. We're in the process of collecting with our team assistants medical records, reports that were made to the authorities, and I've already said that some of the individuals in this group did in fact talk to the FBI. You should know that several of the individuals, and when I say several, I mean many, who did in fact seek medical treatment were drug tested, and drugs were found in their system, weird drugs that you probably never heard of. One in particular that continues to pop up is a drug called xylazine or trank, which based on our research is known as a horse tranquilizer. Now, there's been a lot of reports that we're filing a class action. This is not a class action. Class action is when one or two people file a case on behalf of a group of people. That's not this. These cases will be individual cases. Each case will live and die on its own merit. These cases will be filed individually, one plaintiff against whoever the defendants were involved in the case. Each case may be filed in one venue like California, another case may be filed in New York. One case may sue just Sean Combs, but multiple other people. One case may sue a range of people. I would expect most, though, to be filed, as I said, thinking or hoping or perhaps believing that I may start naming names. Well, that day will come, but it won't be today. The day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and there's a lot of names. It's a long list already. And of course, I already know who some of these individuals are, but because of the nature of this case, we're going to make damn sure that we're right before we do that. But the names that we're going to name, assuming that our investigators confirm and corroborate what we've been told, are names that will shock you. These are individual cases. There are indeed other perpetrators involved. They will be revealed when that particular individual case is ready to be filed. They already know who they are. And I'm talking here about not just the cowardly but complicit bystanders. That is, those people that we know watched this behavior occur and did nothing. And I'm talking about the people that participated, encouraged it, egged it on. They know who they are. I call them the facilitators of foul play, willing participants in vile conduct. As we identify them, each will be part of this case as defendants. These defendants will not only include individuals, but would also include corporate entities who ultimately profited off of this culture and behavior. I'm looking at banks, pharmaceutical companies, hotels. We know that many of these individuals were paid cash. We know that many of these individuals involved, whether they were the ones being assaulted and abused or they're witnessing other people being assaulted and abused and then paid and threatened and told to leave. Typically paid 10 grand in cash and told to leave. And then threatened as they were leaving. So in addition to Sean Combs, you should know the defendants in these cases we're going to file will include anyone, of course, who engaged in the assault or exploitation, anyone who participated in such in any way, anyone who encouraged or facilitated this conduct, anyone who was in the room and watched it happen but made no effort to stop it, any venue or venue owner who was aware of what was going on but failed to stop it, any individual or entity who knew about the conduct and benefited from it but did nothing to report it or stop it, and any individual or entity who covered it up or helped cover it up. These people who know who they are should just come forward now. I would imagine, as we speak here, there are a myriad of people who are very nervous. You can't hide skeletons in the closet forever. I would expect there are many people out there right now who are desperately searching their memories as they delete their texts and data. Now, although these are, in fact, individual cases, there is a common theme, an MO, if you will. Typically, the victim is lured into a situation where he or she is given a drink. Typically, that drink, reported by these victims, is apparently laced with something. Once that drink takes effect, the perpetrators perform all kinds of sexual acts on the victims, many times passing him or her around as other people watch and enjoy the show, and then leave the victim ashamed, confused, injured, and wondering what happened. When the victim reaches out, he or she is told not to say anything. Sometimes there are threats of physical violence or financial repercussions or bodily harm. The claims we intend to bring will include the following: violent sexual assault or rape, sexual abuse, facilitated sex with a controlled substance, false imprisonment, compelling prostitution, sexual misconduct, dissemination of video recordings, false imprisonment, sexual abuse of minors. Given the large volume of cases, and given our other docket obligations, and given the fact that we want to be sure when we file these cases that they are fully vetted, I expect we'll start filing these cases against Sean Combs and other perpetrators within the next 30 days. Now, it's rare, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, this type of activity is pervasive in our society, and it's rare we get a chance where we can really focus on this as a country and really focus on this about how pervasive this is and what we as collectively can do about it. So I thought I'd take this opportunity before I go into some of the individual cases and talk about some of the individual claims being made and so you'll get a sense of what this 120 people group looks like individually. I want to bring forward Carrie Paul. She's a national victim advocate who helps victims who have been victimized by this type of conduct. And she has some important words, and I hope you'll pay close attention. I think it's important that you hear from her.
Hello, I'm Carrie Paul with the National Victim Advocate. It's not easy for any survivor to come forward. Our culture doesn't believe survivors. It blames and questions them. Instead of showing support, many choose to enable abusers. The media runs stories asking why it took so long for survivors to come forward instead of asking what barriers exist. We also don't equip law enforcement with the ability to handle sexual assault crimes. Lack of funding translates to lack of training. We have officers in the field that don't know what to say to a rape victim, and also an alarming amount of backlogged, untested rape kits. Prosecutors are focused on what they can prove in a case, and if so, how to do that at time of trial. Advocates and staff are stretched thin with growing caseloads in the criminal justice system. Most people don't know how the criminal justice works in general. There isn't enough staff or resources to adequately explain the entire process to every victim and survivor. Our culture works against victims and survivors every day, and abusers know this. Abusers work themselves into positions of power, building a public image that is trusted and financially large enough to make people look away. Abusers are unfortunately very skilled at power and control, the foundation of abuse. They seek victims who are vulnerable, such as children, their employees, and their intimate partners, all who see a different version than the public does, all who rely on the abuser in some way. And for those that do come forward and aren't believed, face questions like, are you sure it happened that way? Were you drinking? What were you wearing? All of this creates an environment that enables abusers to continue abusing them and future victims. To the survivors that have come forward despite not being believed at some point in time, your courage is like nothing we have seen before. We thank you for coming forward for yourself and all survivors. And lastly, I want all survivors that are watching this to know we believe you and we support you. Thank you.
I want you now to hear from my co-counsel, Andrew Van Arsdale. We've created a sexual abuse hotline, and I want him to visit with us just a few moments about how that works and the kind of volume of calls we've received.
Thank you, Tony. Like Tony said, my name is Andrew Van Arsdale. I'm the managing partner of Baby A Law Group. We have offices in California, Montana, and North Carolina. To build off of what you just so well said, it's very hard to come forward. And given what we've experienced the past 10 days is really unprecedented in my career, at least. We represent thousands of survivors of abuse, and never, ever in a 10-day period have we seen over 3,000 people come forward, or we've confirmed and decided to investigate and represent 120 people while we're continuing to work through another 100 plus cases to prove them up, to validate what had happened here, and to hold those that are responsible accountable. And so like Tony said, we've set this up. It's 1-800-200-7474. I have a team of people standing by literally. If you know that this happened to someone and you have information about it, please contact us. If this happened to you, come forward. There's attorney-client privilege here. What you tell us is in confidence. Yes, we'll have to go out and build your case, but we will protect you. And the other thing that I want to say is the pattern and practice of this, again, is unprecedented. Over 30 plus years of the same sort of events happening, people thrust into the circle reportedly, and horrible things happening to them as a result. And from talking to these people that have come forward these past 10 days, I can tell you unequivocally that because the federal government did what it needed to do and indicted this man, that they put him in jail and a judge kept him in jail, they tell me directly, this validates my feelings. For so long, I thought it was my fault. What is it about me that put myself in that scenario? What was I wearing at the time? What did I do to be subjected to such horrific treatment at these people that I was trying to trust? Well, we know now it was not your fault. You were victimized by a group of powerful people that operated for 30 plus years, taking advantage of their wealth and the power that they held within the music industry. So again, thank you to every single person that has come forward and contacted our office over the past 10 days. If you or someone you know suffered the same sort of treatment, please contact us at the number behind me and we will help you. Thank you.
I think it speaks to how important this issue is in the United States and frankly internationally, that we have reputable people here that want to provide kind of information that I think victims need to hear, witnesses need to hear, the public needs to hear. Let me introduce to you now Olivia Rivers from the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, and let her visit with you a few moments about these types of cases.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Q Olivia Rivers. I am just served my 6th year as the board chair for the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. I'm also the CEO for the Bridge Over Troubled Waters, which is a local rape crisis center here in the Houston area. So thank you for being here as we address these heinous crimes. Sexual assault is not just a crime of violence against the body. It's an assault on the very essence of human dignity and safety. It shatters lives, it destroys confidence, and all too often, it leaves survivors feeling like they are voiceless, isolated, and vulnerable. The reality for many survivors is that coming forward to report their assault is one of the most difficult and daunting tasks that they will ever have to do. And for some, it may take days, months, or even years to speak up, if they ever do. The reasons for this have been mentioned, but include the fear of being disbelieved, being blamed or judged, and, of course, retaliation. The trauma of the assault itself being compounded by the trauma of the criminal justice process, where survivors must relive their experience in order to seek justice. And these feelings and fears are further exacerbated when the allegations are against prominent figures in the entertainment industry or Hollywood. Cases involving powerful figures often attract significant media attention, which can deter victims from coming forward due to fear of public exposure or scrutiny. The intense focus on these high-profile cases can make survivors feel that their personal lives are being put under a microscope, causing further emotional distress. These allegations mentioned here today, as reported, reflect deeply troubling claims that deserve thorough investigation, and no individual, regardless of their stature, is above the law or public accountability. Sadly, the statistics paint a very disturbing picture. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. In the U.S. alone, there are approximately 463,000 victims of rape or sexual assault every year, and these numbers barely scratch the surface, as sexual violence remains one of the most underreported crimes. But the numbers that follow tell an even more troubling story. Only about 23% of sexual assaults are reported to law enforcement. Of those, just 5% lead to an arrest, and even fewer, less than 1% of reported cases, ever result in a conviction, which is a devastating gap between the crime and the justice that survivors deserve. I want to briefly focus on our state here in Texas. According to the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, 6.3 million Texans, men and women, will experience some form of violence. That's every 2 minutes someone is sexually assaulted, meaning during the course of this press conference, around 60 individuals will forever be changed by this violence. And those are just a few of the victims. Obviously, this is unacceptable. We cannot allow this cycle of silence and inaction to continue. We have to create an environment where survivors feel empowered to come forward, where they are met with empathy and respect and support, not skepticism and blame. We have to ensure that our legal system is equipped to handle these cases with the seriousness they deserve, and that survivors have access to the resources that they need beyond the legal courtroom. We have to address the root causes of this epidemic: prevention, awareness, and fostering environments where respect, consent, and safety are non-negotiable values. Additionally, support for survivors has to be holistic. They have to have access to counseling, medical services, legal advocacy, and of course, community support, regardless of whether they choose to report or not. To every survivor who has come forward, your bravery is an inspiration. To those who are still grappling with their decision, know that you are not alone and that your voice matters. Your story matters. We see you, we believe you, and we are committed to fighting for a future where sexual violence is no longer tolerated and where justice is not the exception, but the standard. Thank you.
I want to visit with you real quickly before we close here about some specific instances without disclosing the victim's name. You probably know that depending on the age of the victim, you can file these cases, these individual cases, under Jane Doe or John Doe. Each state is different in that respect. Typically, there is a balancing test, like the public's right to know the name of the victim and plaintiff versus the confidentiality and the safety of the plaintiff. So we'll have to struggle with that with each one of these cases. Our intention, of course, is to, like we always do, file these cases under a pseudonym until the court tells us otherwise. But let me share with you a few, just kind of give you a sense of the kind of cases and the kind of instances that people are calling and reporting that we are trying to corroborate, vet, and these are the ones that we've already corroborated, vetted, and collected evidence on. One individual who was 22 years at the time she was assaulted said that the typical MO at one of these parties that have been widely discussed in the press was that when you were handed a drink, and now we know that the drink is laced with something, if you refused to drink it, you were kicked out of the party. Now let that sink in for a minute. I mean, the admission to this party was that you had to drink the chosen drink that was handed to you, and now we know that in most cases, I would say 90% of the cases, these individuals were drugged with some sort of drug. That was kind of the MO. Another instance, this individual who was 9 years old at the time was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. Other boys were there to audition as well. All of them were trying to land a record deal. All of them were minors. This individual was sexually abused, allegedly by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio in the promise to both his parents and to him himself of getting a record deal. Another instance, another minor, told allegedly by Sean Combs that he would make him a star, but he needed to visit with him in private about it, away from his parents. Once they were in a private area, allegedly Mr. Combs made the victim perform oral sex upon him. Another incident, an individual 15 years old at the time, flown to New York City to attend a party, was drugged, and then taken into a private room, allegedly in the presence of Mr. Combs, where this female individual, minor, was raped, and then other individuals took turns raping her. Another individual, 26 at the time of the occurrence, was picked up allegedly by Mr. Combs and several other people in a black SUV from the airport, was given one drink in the SUV, and then literally woke up the next day not knowing what had happened, but with pain and damage to both her vagina and her anus, where she then went to the hospital. She was missing her underwear and her shoes. Another instance, an individual, this time not a minor, attended a group dinner, allegedly with Sean Combs in Miami. She wasn't drinking because she was pregnant, but whatever she drank at the table, apparently, at least according to her, was laced with something. She blacked out, and she woke up in the same bed, again, allegedly, with Mr. Combs in his mansion in Miami. Her vagina and her anus were torn and sore. And I could go on. I mean, literally, you're sensing a theme here. It's the same theme, and it all involves some sort of drug. One instance, an individual who was 20 years old at the time was asked to attend, just saw her on the street, asked to attend a party in a hotel. She was flattered, went to the party, was given one drink and doesn't remember anything else. Ultimately, was so messed up, went to the hospital where they found cocaine and this horse tranquilizer in her blood system. I want to give you a quote from a very young man who told us over the phone about his experience and all the things that happened to him, he says, allegedly at the hands of Sean Diddy Combs and his friends in the effort to try to sign a record deal. This was kind of what he was told he would have to do. His quote is, "Had he not been in power, I feel like I could have been something great. I quit the industry because of what Sean Combs did to me." And that's really what it comes down to. We are pursuing this, asking you to support this effort, to encourage witnesses and victims to come forward and bring your evidence so we can continue to break down this wall of silence and we can continue to have these stories heard. This is the beginning of what I hope to be a national dialogue. This type of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and sexual exploitation should never happen in the United States or anywhere else. This should have never been allowed to go on for so long. This conduct has created a mass of individuals who are injured, scared, and scarred. If you are one of those individuals, we ask you to reach out. If not to us, to someone you trust. If you are someone who witnessed any of these events, we ask you to reach out. Your name can remain confidential. With that, I'll take a few questions, not many, maybe two, but if you have a question, I'll be pleased to try to answer it. Perfect.
How many minors are making accusations in total, and are the feds aware of the allegations of minors in the case?
I don't know what the feds are aware of, okay, but I do know it's 25 out of this 120.
And Tony,
But I will say this to that point. We welcome the FBI or any authority who wants to come to us, and we're going to make that available to these victims because I think that's important. My suspicion is, based on talking with these folks, is that the FBI is just not aware of these people. The FBI has talked to some of these folks, and I'm going to try to encourage the victims to, in fact, talk to the FBI because I think they have some very important things to say.
Tony, were all of the children auditioning because they were musicians, or were any of them kids of employees or anything like that?
All seeking either TV or some sort of music career with promises of, we're going to make you a star. Instead, basically did things to them such that they don't want to have anything to do with the entertainment industry ever again. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your attention. We're going to go now. Thank you.
Tony, do you anticipate any Houston cases?
Any filed here?
Locally, yeah.
There's a few plaintiffs here, but I don't anticipate filing them here. Probably in New York City.
These names, you heard him just say it. It's names we all know. And they're coming out soon. Within 30 days, we'll be talking about people that you won't believe on this series. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for supporting me. Check out the Patreon if you're not a member yet. I got a bonus episode, by the way, coming if I haven't already dropped it for the Patreon members. Gifts coming out, headed your way already for the Patreon. Top tier subscribers are global celebrities. Love all of you. Until next time, I'm Jim Chapman, your host of Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. Much love.